Welcome back to another episode of Out Loud Geek, where we discuss news and views about pop culture, science fiction, fantasy, food, cooking, the outdoors, and more. It's time, once again, for another depressing dose of dismal Disney. What the heck is happening with The Mandalorian? When this show first premiered on Disney Plus back on November 12th, 2019, it was the service's flagship show and was the first new Star Wars content since the release of that failure of a film, Solo: A Star Wars Story, on May 25th, 2018, which became the first ever Star Wars film to lose money at the box office. But when the series saw huge numbers of Star Wars fans tuning in weeks before that dumpster fire of a film, Star Wars IX: The Rise of Palpatine, premiered in theaters the following month, it was in large part due to the growing dissatisfaction among Star Wars fans for Kathleen Kennedy's Star Wars sequel trilogy. And while that dumpster fire of a movie, The Rise of Palpatine, did manage to break even and make a very small profit from its theatrical run, as it was the lowest grossing of the three sequel trilogy movies, most hardcore Star Wars fans were far more interested in The Mandalorian and its main character named Din Djarin, as played by the actor Pedro Pascal. Then when the show introduced the character that initially became known as Baby Yoda, before his name was later revealed to be Grogu, even more people were tuning in because they loved how cute the character is. So while there was practically no demand for toys related to that dumpster fire of a film, The Rise of Palpatine, when toy figures of Din Djarin and Grogu finally started to be released in stores months after the show premiered, they were selling out fast. Baby Yoda fever held the public's attention for a long time, and well into the show's second season that premiered on Disney Plus on October 30th, 2020. And like the show's first season, the second season also did incredibly well, though its viewership numbers did see a slight decline. But problems began to emerge after the final second season episode aired on Disney Plus in late December of 2020. First, there was the abrupt firing of actress Gina Carano in early February of 2021. She had played the popular secondary character Cara Dune in The Mandalorian, but she was unceremoniously fired by Lucasfilm via Twitter following a storm of far-left cancel culture activists on that platform tweeted for her to be terminated because of how they were interpreting something Gina had posted on her Instagram account, which she later deleted. Gina's personal conservative views, which she occasionally shared on social media, made her a huge target of far-left cancel culture activists who had probably never watched The Mandalorian. But her firing ultimately infuriated many of the show's fans, and it also meant that a spin-off Lucasfilm Disney Plus project that was supposed to have Gina Carano star in it as Cara Dune and was called Rangers of the New Republic might never happen. Rangers of the New Republic had been announced to shareholders by Kathleen Kennedy during a Disney Investment Day presentation in December of 2020. But then only 5 months later, in May of 2021, which was 3 months after the firing of Gina Carano, it was buried in an article about Dave Filoni in Variety that Rangers of the New Republic was no longer in active development. And that was likely another blow to fans of The Mandalorian, because many of them had been looking forward to that series, and there was no upcoming release date for the start of the third season for The Mandalorian. In other words, everything seemed to have come to a halt surrounding the show, with the exception of the much anticipated The Book of Boba Fett, which was also announced in December of 2020, with a release date of December of 2021. And sure enough, in late December 2021, the Book of Boba Fett series did indeed premiere, and Din Djarin, the main character from The Mandalorian, as well as Grogu, were in 2 of the show's episodes. On the surface, that may sound good, but the execution was extremely bad. I'll share part of an article that was posted in June 2022 entitled, "The Book of Boba Fett is a failure that holds warnings and lessons for future Star Wars projects." It's quite an ominous title for sure, but let's see what's in the article, because some of the problems that surfaced in The Book of Boba Fett parallel what's happening now in the third season of The Mandalorian. When The Book of Boba Fett was abruptly announced at the end of The Mandalorian Season 2, there was a palpable sense of excitement across the Star Wars community. Despite Boba Fett having only a few lines of dialogue with his original debut in The Empire Strikes Back and a disappointingly brief role in Return of the Jedi, the bounty hunter has been one of the most popular characters across the long history of the Star Wars franchise. While Fett's character has been fleshed out in the pre-Disney EU books, material that Disney declared in 2013 to be legends, the bounty hunter has never been the focus of a film or series. The Book of Boba Fett was an opportunity for Lucasfilm to give Boba Fett the attention that many fans have long felt that the character deserved. And despite the buzz that surrounded the show, the streaming series received a mixed reception. Given the outpouring of support for The Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett seems to be a big misstep for Star Wars on Disney+. Why? Because the Book of Boba Fett is a confusing 7-episode mess that fails to establish a clear identity for its central character. And the show fails to keep its focus on Boba Fett and his comrade Fennec Shand, who are two of the core characters of the show. Beset with pacing issues and the need to connect to other Star Wars properties, the Book of Boba Fett is a storytelling failure that holds lessons and warnings for future Star Wars projects. One of the largest issues with the Book of Boba Fett is the shifting focus of its story. In an article titled, "The Book of Boba Fett is so busy it forgets to make Boba Fett interesting," writer Chaim Gartenberg asserted that the Book of Boba Fett is essentially 3 distinct and disparate shows wrapped into one package. The first show is the flashbacks to Fett's time as a member of the Tuskens following his escape from the Sarlacc pit. While the series managed to humanize the Tuskens more than any other show with their own unique culture, the band of Tuskens that Fett lived with are unceremoniously wiped out off-screen, which felt extremely hollow because it also failed to show how Fett reacted, and the massacre was never placed into context with the rest of the series. Does this sound familiar? It should to anyone who has watched Kathleen Kennedy's sequel trilogy, because they can attest to how hollow much of it is thanks to its overuse of off-screen plot points and how disjoint the 3 movies are with each other. The second show is Fett's pursuits as a crime lord in Mos Espa, which felt very inconsistent with his time as a protector for the Tuskens. Then the third show follows the Mandalorians Din Djarin and Baby Yoda, who show up in episodes 5 and 6 and proceed to become the show's main characters, as Boba Fett is essentially pushed aside in his own show and is barely featured in either episode. For many, these 2 episodes felt more like a 3rd season of The Mandalorian than being part of the Book of Boba Fett, and thus they fail to advance the present struggle between Boba Fett and the Pikes, who are trying to take control of Fett's territory on Tatooine. Thus, instead of providing a simple but enjoyable cameo for the titular Mandalorian, these bloated episodes' deviations from the main storyline take the focus away from Boba Fett and Fennec Shand, who are the characters that the viewers are supposed to be invested in. Gee, this is sounding more and more familiar, isn't it? Right now, that's essentially what has happened within The Mandalorian Season 3. The character Bo-Katan, as played by the actress Katie Sackhoff in The Mandalorian, was first voiced by her when the character was initially introduced in the 4th season of the animated series Star Wars: The Clone Wars in the episode A Friend in Need. The character would appear several more times in the Clone Wars before appearing again in the animated series Star Wars Rebels, which takes place 15 years after the events of the Clone Wars. Now that she's in The Mandalorian, age-wise within the Star Wars timeline, the Bo-Katan character has to be at least in her late 50s or early 60s, which seems a bit old to be running around as she is in the series. And if you're wondering, that age came from an article that was posted by Screen Rant only a month ago in March. So the 50 to 60-year-old Bo-Katan has essentially now become the main character in The Mandalorian, relegating Pedro Pascal's character of Din Djarin, which is who the show was named for and has been based on for more than 2 years, to now being nothing more than a secondary character in his own show, along with Grogu. And this was essentially confirmed during last weekend's Star Wars celebration in London, when executive producer Rick Famuyiwa declared that Din Djarin isn't what the show's title is based on. You mean, well into the 3rd season of the show, Lucasfilm is now telling longtime viewers and fans that the character that has always been at the center of the show, and was the titular character for everyone, is simply no longer the case. This is nothing more than an excuse to shift the mantle of the main character to Bo-Katan, a female character. Kathleen Kennedy has now come into the most popular show that Disney Plus has ever had, and usurped the show's male lead Din Djarin with the female character Bo-Katan. Anytime a show has a popular male lead character, Kathleen Kennedy has to emasculate that character and replace it with a female lead, which is essentially what happened in the Obi-Wan Kenobi series when the titular character was essentially transformed into a secondary character and replaced with its version of a young, obnoxious, and very unlikable Princess Leia, as presented in the series, along with the antagonist Inquisitor Reva, who many people also didn't like and which had nothing to do with her skin color. For anyone who has invested their time and emotion into the character of Din Djarin, they've essentially been screwed over by Rick Famuyiwa and Kathleen Kennedy. It's absolutely no wonder why Season 3 of The Mandalorian has lost millions of viewers, and the audience ratings have also plummeted. How much? Let's take a look at Rotten Tomatoes. Season 1 has an impressive audience score of 92%. Season 2 has an almost equally impressive audience score of 91%. But lo and behold, the audience score for Season 3 has plummeted to 49%. That's a huge drop, and what it basically says is that the series has abandoned everything that made it a good show, and in all likelihood, the emasculation and replacement of Din Djarin as the show's main character has had catastrophic results with viewers. The decision to exalt Bo-Katan over Din Djarin within the series was probably another self-destructive order that came down from Kathleen Kennedy. And the result is that the one Star Wars series that for 2 years had given millions of fans hope that the franchise could still be saved from Kathleen Kennedy's horrible decisions has now fallen victim to her horrific management practices. Many of the problems that plagued the Book of Boba Fett have clearly been adopted into The Mandalorian and are driving it into the same fate. As far as I'm concerned, Star Wars as a franchise is now dead because it was killed by Kathleen Kennedy. I've watched other YouTubers come to this same conclusion over the past few years. When George Lucas made his fateful decision of trusting Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger when he decided to sell Lucasfilm and the Star Wars franchise to Disney in late 2012, little did he know just how quickly they would utterly destroy everything that he had built. Thanks for watching today, and a huge thanks to everyone who has subscribed to our channel. We appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please press the like button, and please feel free to share a comment. If you'd like to see more of our videos in the future and help support this channel, please press the red subscribe button, and please press the bell to receive notifications for new content. You can also find us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links in the description. Until next time, this is Out Loud Geek.